So as Kimberly and Liz and her family and Victoria have already pointed out to you, sometimes the best way to solve problems is to empower the people that are actually facing those problems. Through social media, rapidly evolving technology, and access to the internet, patients are more connected than ever and equipped to help solve their own challenges. Grassroots patient-driven innovation is sweeping the medical community, driving awareness and funding for certain diseases, and even the creation of medical devices to serve patient-specific needs. So let's take a look at the patient perspective.
This is an infusion set for the site, so there's tubing and stuff, and this is what you put on your body to put the needle in.
This is what life is like for many type 1 diabetics. Insulin, syringes, and dozens of finger sticks, or if they're lucky, maybe pumps and continuous glucose monitors. A lot to manage for anyone, but especially for an active young person like Morgan Panzirer.
I'd say when I was maybe 8 or 9, I kind of started to have the realization that this is what I have to deal with, and you can't just sit here and mope around. You kind of gotta pick yourself up and keep going. So that's when I think I was really okay, I'm ready for this.
That positive attitude will help Morgan's kid sister, Caroline. She has several autoantibodies that mean type 1 diabetes is just a matter of time.
Yeah, I know it's coming, so I kind of just have to accept it and move on, but I'm trying to grasp my mind around it. It's definitely going to be hard, but I know I just have to push through it because there's no way around it.
It looks like your blood sugars are going high. Do you remember the last few days it looks like you're going high? Do you remember what you're eating?
What's made the diabetes experience a little less of an ordeal has been the unwavering involvement of Morgan and Caroline's parents. Here, Dad makes sure Morgan is tracking her blood sugar, but it was Mom, a registered dietitian, who first picked up on Morgan's diabetes symptoms.
Morgan had been, she'd been exhibiting all the signs of diabetes: excessive thirst, increased, she was losing weight, she had been losing control of her bladder during the night, which was unusual for her.
That quickly led to a type 1 diagnosis, but then something else happened that would change not just the Panzirer family, but the course of diabetes research.
Morgan got diagnosed in March of 2007, and 5 months later, my grandmother, who was Leona Helmsley, passes away, and here I am as one of trustees of now it's a $5.5 billion trust. Not such a subtle message as to what I should be doing with my time. So I decided at that point, I made a very simple promise to Morgan when she was diagnosed, and that was, I'll help you in any way that I can. And I view these two events as, the opportunity of a lifetime. If I didn't take and put everything I had into this and pass up this opportunity, I think I'd be doing a disservice to my child and not keeping the promise that I made her.
That's led the Helmsley Trust to make large investments in a variety of diabetes research and treatment initiatives, from improving glucose control and access to care to regenerating beta cells.
So this is my pump here, and it hooks up right there.
And the continuous glucose monitor and insulin pumps that have allowed Morgan to keep very tight control over her blood sugar. Morgan and her dad have even ventured into the world of do-it-yourself glucose management by working with hackers to improve on the device's control algorithms. The Trust has also turned its attention to delaying or preventing type 1 diabetes by using oral insulin in genetically determined at-risk non-diabetics. Through all of this, Panzirer and the Trust learned that for philanthropy to succeed, you must remember certain business principles.
Because at the end of the day, what you want is you want to deliver a drug, a device, or a therapy to market. And in order to make that happen, 3 things have to happen, right? The FDA has to approve it, the payers have to pay for it, and the company has to believe that they're going to make money so that they'll do the manufacturing and distribution. And any one of those 3 things is a deal breaker.
But what really makes philanthropy and innovation truly meaningful is patient centricity, keeping the human person at the center of the equation, never forgetting that's why we work so hard.
Our next panelists have each been affected by type 1 diabetes. Some have children with the disease. Some are diagnosed themselves. Please welcome David Panzirer, Dr. Aaron Kowalski, and Pete Schwamb, who are changing the landscape of diagnosis, treatment, and care for diabetes patients. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
So we were chatting on the phone a few days ago about patient centricity, and you guys summed it up as the ability of people with disease to scratch their own itch, essentially. So I want to delve into that a little bit more, but first I want to get at the personal stories that led each of you to where you are today. David, I'll start with you. You are now a trustee. I am. You came to that place because of the Helmsley Charitable Trust, because you had two daughters diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, one 11 years ago and one 6 months ago,
Yep.
Correct? And it was frustration that really put you on this path. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So I didn't realize most of what I was going to say was actually being presented by Max Gomez in that video. So I'm going to go on the fly. But I think what I'd like to explain first is just real briefly, we heard this morning Gina's panel, they talked about what type 1 diabetes is and the difference. It's an autoimmune disease. What I'd really like to focus on is the burden of this disease and what a 24/7 grind it is. And since the video, my second daughter was diagnosed, and she's very early on. We were watching her. But this disease is a 24/7 grind. And what that means for us at home is that I wake up twice a night. I get both of my children's blood sugars readings on my phone. So they use technology, they use a CGM. And that is honestly, that's changed the way we live and that's improved our lives greatly. The technology and what you'll hear about in a little bit has really dramatically changed our lives. So as I said in the video, 5 months after my first daughter gets diagnosed, I find myself a trustee of what's now a really large trust, which was great, except I had no clue about medical research. I didn't understand anything about how to get a drug or device or a therapy to market. What I did know is I recognized what an amazing opportunity this was to actually have an impact on my own child's disease. Fear is a really good motivator, and I traveled quite a bit. We didn't make our first grant for 18 months. I did 18 months of diligence. I was fortunate enough to work with somebody who was already in the space for the last 7 years to help speed my learning. I've now been at this 11 years. Every meeting I go to, I continue to learn.
But there was frustration that started that when doctors would talk to you about type 1 diabetes.
Listen, when my daughter was first diagnosed, we inevitably heard, don't worry, we'll have a cure for her by the time she's in high school. And she's a junior now, by the way, and we're still not that close. And to me, I always say, and I do a lot of public speaking, a lot of talking to parents of newly diagnosed, and you inevitably get, when's the cure coming? I think there's been over 200 published cures of mice in type 1 diabetes. Not a one has ever translated to people yet. We're hopeful and I'm optimistic. But at the same time, if what we were doing were easy, if there were a blueprint to doing this, we'd be done. It's not that simple. So anybody who says they know how to do it, it's just not truthful. So part of the frustration was around the messaging. Part of the frustration was around the tools to manage the disease. It's a really tough disease to manage.
And you decided to go with a business model. You said to me in the back, I think of it as just common sense.
I do. Honestly, it was what I know. It was the only thing that I understand. So to me, you start with a goal and you drive towards that goal. And in order to be able to do that, you have to do the diligence. There's no shortcut.
Aaron, you have type 1 diabetes. So I assume that had a lot to do with what led you to be part of the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation and now the Chief Mission Officer. Talk to us a little bit about your story and what that means to be the mission officer.
Sure. So I am the second type 1 in our family. I'm the oldest of 6 kids, but my younger brother was diagnosed when he was 3. So that's over 40 years ago, and I was diagnosed when I was 13. And that was certainly a motivation. My brother has what's called hypoglycemia unawareness. So Gina mentioned that you're dosing a dangerous drug multiple times a day. Back when we were diagnosed, there wasn't even blood sugar testing. So you used to do urine testing, you would dose this drug, and he didn't sense his hypoglycemia, so he's been in an ambulance many, many times. It's actually a miracle, I think, that he's alive right now. And that certainly motivated me, sharing that experience. We shared a bedroom, my living with diabetes. And now, being a scientist, combining, we were hearing a lot about patient centricity, bringing my science background plus this experience of living with somebody with type 1, living with it, I think has helped our mission at JDRF. So our mission is to cure type 1, and David and I know that that's hard, but we're still plowing forward, and I think we're making great progress. But the one thing that I'll add to this audience is that even with the very best tools, You know, the three of us here, you're going to hear, we're using these amazing tools. It's still an incredibly difficult disease to manage. The average person with an insulin pump and a continuous monitor still spends only about 50 to 60% of the day in the normal glucose range, if that. So our mission is to cure the disease, but in the meantime, we need to make sure people are healthy when we get to a cure. So that we're trying to drive better outcomes, and that's what our mission is.
And that has not been the norm.
Well, when I started at JDRF, we were a basic discovery science organization. And basic discovery science, I look at Dr. Collins here, I mean, all of the advances that we're making, I was a basic scientist. But ultimately, we need to see those advances reach the hands of people. Research isn't an end, I don't think. I think it's a means to an end to impact health for the better. So we, as David pointed out, we work very closely with Helmsley on, you take an advance, you have a commercial pathway, you have a regulatory pathway. I see Dr. Califf here. We worked with Dr. Califf when he was commissioner at FDA. What is the pathway for an artificial pancreas? And he was a tremendous champion in that partnership. Reimbursement is a huge issue in the United States. We worked on access for the Medicare population for these devices. They weren't covered. So I'm benefiting, my brother's benefiting, it's reducing lows. A person who's 65 and can't afford it can't benefit. So there's advocacy and policy, and we heard this morning, and there's research. They have to blend, and it has to be also scientists, doctors, and patients working together.
And the do-it-yourself community, which leads us to Pete, who did something incredible because he loves his daughter Riley, who's in the audience.
Yes,
she has type 1 diabetes, and he wanted to improve her quality of life. So you came up with something called the RileyLink. Can you explain what that is, what drove you to do that?
Well, yeah, I think we've heard that type 1 diabetes is it's an intense disease, and it's really impacted our lives in a big way. We went from the normal difficulties of being a parent and trying to figure that out to all of a sudden having to wake up several times a night to do tests. And when Aaron says that you're 50, 60% normal, the other percent of the time is you're either high and you're worried about long-term health effects, or you're low and it's very immediate danger. I mean, we get very concerned. So you go through this roller coaster every day. And as a parent, you want to help and you do anything you can. And so we started digging into I started looking at what I could do. I don't have a medical background, and so the biomedical stuff was kind of out of reach, I thought. I did have software, and I started looking at what we needed to do to get her numbers in better range. And trying to get the data off the pump was a nightmare. And so there really wasn't much that I could do, I felt. As a parent, I felt very frustrated. And so I dug into the hardware side and started to try to figure out how I could actually make this device give me the numbers that that her blood sugar was at. And it was a long road of trial and error and lots of things that didn't work, but eventually was able to talk to the pump and get the data off, which immediately was great. I didn't have to interrupt Riley and ask her what her blood sugar was, and she'd be irritated at me for having to interrupt whatever she was doing. And I could see it on my phone, and that was a huge breakthrough. Along that same time, other people in the community, I released this stuff open source. I didn't have any plans to try to commercialize this. I was mainly trying to make our lives better, and along the way realized that other people would probably benefit as well. And so released this as open source. Other people started taking it, and we actually developed a closed loop system which takes her blood sugar readings and automatically changes every 5 minutes what the insulin delivery would be. And
is that on the market now?
It's not on the market. It's out there. It's open source. So it's a community that built this. It's all open source. It's people working in their spare time to try to make things better. And the FDA, understandably, things have to go through a process before they can be marketed. And so we've taken.
Is that hard, even if you understand that, because the FDA is looking out for the safety of the patient? Mm-hmm. On the other hand, time is ticking for you all.
Right. I mean, that's the big thing is, I was a little bit worried to go down this route and start doing it, but we realize we're already in a very risky situation. I was waking up at 2 o'clock in the morning and dealing with sugars that I couldn't explain. I don't know how much insulin it's going to take to go down, and I'm doing math in my head, and that's a dangerous situation. If I can write a simple algorithm that would do some of this basic math, it's probably going to be safer. And shortly after we closed the loop and started doing this, it was amazing. Just at nighttime, having better in range let us sleep more. We're waking up Riley less, and yeah, it's.
How important do you all think the do-it-yourself community is and this patient centricity movement?
So,
even beyond type 1 diabetes.
yeah, I think the concept of scratching your own itch is huge. What Pete has done is, so the first closed loop system, if you can call it a closed loop system, is FDA approved by Medtronic. It's out on the market. What Pete has done is 10 steps ahead of it. It makes what the Medtronic has done is, I don't want to call it amateur because it's legitimate product on the market, but these guys are the bleeding edge of technological advance for our disease. And I think what Pete said is very important, which is perspective, right? We balance this every day, and although this is not ready for everybody, the fact is that people are having major issues and bad outcomes using all of the FDA-approved technologies. I'm not a very technologically advanced person, and they open sourced it and made it, I don't want to call it idiot-proof, but it's pretty darn good.
The interesting thing, Meredith, I think that's highlighted here is that I often ask if I'm giving talks to lay audiences, but even this audience, I would say, how many people here have diabetes or on insulin? So one. How many? So anybody without diabetes here wearing an insulin pump? No. So in the history of man, I've never come across somebody who wears an insulin pump to be cool or because it's fun to poke yourself every 3 days and get it caught on a doorknob. And my point in this is that the term compliance came up earlier this morning. In the patient community, we hate that term.
Why is that?
Because why aren't you compliant? And really, what does compliance mean? It distills down to what is the return on investment. So I'm making an investment to do this. I'm poking myself. I'm wearing something I wouldn't normally wear otherwise. So the return on investment needs to be higher. And I think what Pete has shown, and David and I both benefit from Pete's technology. I took a picture with Riley earlier. I said, "You're a celebrity. Did you know that?"
Also, did you see the way she was smiling at her dad when her dad was
no,
speaking?
it's amazing. Her dad's changing the world.
Two.
So, and I think it shows that sometimes the companies aren't completely, or the doctors in the room aren't completely aligned with the needs of their patients.
Why is that, though?
Well, I think this gets to the talks that we're having throughout today is we need the voice of the patient. So what this community has delivered is, so for example, you and I, we talked about, if you haven't seen an insulin pump before, I'll pull it out. So I have an insulin pump on. You can imagine if you're a 17-year-old at school. One of the average 17-year-old in the United States has an A1C of 9.3%. That's like pre-DCCT numbers, which is a big trial to show the damage of high blood sugar, the damage that high blood sugar can cause with an A1C that's high. A lot of the times they're not bolusing or giving insulin when they need to eat. Well, because how many kids want to, hey, look at me, I have diabetes. So simple things like Pete's and the community have built an app that you can bolus off your iPhone. So if I'm a clinician, I'm worried about A1C. If I'm a patient who's 17, I may be worried about being called out by kids at school. I had a kid in New Jersey who was crying on stage with me recently. She was bullied at school because of her diabetes. So of course her A1C was through the roof. These little things go a long way into achieving better outcomes, and I think that's why we need to bridge this gap even further.
And where are we in terms of bridging the gap?
I think Helmsley and JDRF, the DIY community, on this initiative alone, David and I were just at FDA this week. Talking on Monday. David and I were saying, what day of the week is it? Just on Monday, talking about solutions that are coming out of the DIY community, working on a regulatory pathway that's for the masses, and accelerating. the voice of the patient, the voice of the industry, the voice of the clinical community coming together, I think we're making great progress in the type 1 community.
So where is the resistance then, because there still is some?
Pete, you want to?
So I think it's just a change from business as normal, right? Like, you know, this is a different world we live in with technology, and the evolution of the different parts of the system are changing in very different ways, and it's no longer the case where you just would build a system and give it to somebody. You know, people have different phones, they have different systems, and so you know, the FDA has to change how they look at this stuff, industry also has to work in different ways. They have to work with other companies and work with the patients that might be interested in their data, actually.
Well, maybe I'm a dinosaur, but if I saw something that did not have FDA approval, I might be scared of, like the RileyLink.
Sure.
I don't know you. I don't know your research.
I think, Meredith, I'm just looking up at Dr. Califf. I think one of the things that's been really important in moving this forward, where is the resistance? One of the resistance is safety. And is it safe enough? And we worked with Dr. Califf and Dr. Hamburg previously, before Dr. Califf, on really having the voice of the patient also at FDA. Because FDA was confronted with, here's a drug that shows up on their adverse event reports like crazy. You give a little too much at the wrong time and you can kill somebody. And now you want to give an algorithm that'll just give a lot of this insulin all the time. Then you shift and you hear us say, we're living a very dangerous existence right now. And where is the balance point? And working with FDA, we've reshifted the balance point and have a lot more voice of the patient. I think that's helped, and I think it could be mimicked in many disease states that are represented in this room to create a pathway that's faster.
Are there any models out there already that are doing similar things?
So I was just going to comment, I'm sure there are, but I think that the common denominator or the theme is you have to engage with all of the stakeholders, right? And at the end of the day, the public charities are in the space, the FDA, industry. We have spent a lot of time with FDA. They have been nothing but engaging with us from day one. And I heard very early on they're a barrier. We have not had that experience whatsoever. They've helped us, they've learned. But the point is, you now have to take what Pete has designed and gather data to prove that it's safe and effective, and we're about to do that. We were on a call last week. We're going to go and do this in a study, observational study, where we're going to go and collect data on these people using these devices so that we can go back to the FDA and show them, listen, we're in a precarious situation already. These devices are safe and effective. Here's the data on however many hundreds of people are using it. And we know a number of doctors who have type 1 that are wearing it as well.
So you are literally driving the research moving forward.
Yes.
And while we were sitting here, so calm and cool, collected, something went off just to show the audience how much this is part of your life.
So what that beeping was my daughter. I was getting a low blood sugar alert on one of my children. Not planned at all, but
that's the way you live your life.
I get the alerts all the time. I've been in Germany at a conference and had to wake my wife up at some ungodly hour back home because my daughter was really low and I didn't see the trend reversing. Listen, everybody's got their stuff and this is ours and we just march on. That's what we have to do.
So to the philanthropists and trustees in particular in the audience, what do you see as their basic role to get change done moving forward?
So to me, I think the philanthropist in the room, the key is do the diligence. There's no replacing the diligence. I would say the simplest way to put it, do as much diligence as you did to make your money, to give your money away. That's simple. There is no simple cure. If it sounds too simple, it probably is.
I would also say beware of top-down approaches. What you're hearing, a theme here, is the people who are impacted by these diseases have a big voice and can guide you on solutions. Ultimately, whether it's a company, whatever, if people don't, there's not a high degree of effectiveness, it's not going to succeed. And effectiveness comes from listening to the people impacted with the disease.
And I'll end with Pete. Just take a long look at your daughter, Riley, and tell me what goes through your head when you look at her, why you're doing this.
Yeah, I would say look at solutions that are actually making a difference and that actually connect with people. There's a lot that can be done that's not, the long goal is the cure, but there's a lot of stuff that can be done right now to make a big difference.
Thank you guys so much. Such a pleasure.
Meredith.
Thank you all so much.